Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. I am your host Faisal Raza Khan and you are watching Foresight. Viewers, Pakistan is implementing International Monetary Fund standby arrangement in letter and spirit, just to not only to complete this important cycle till April, but also to attain maximum economic stability. In the same connection, IMF's second review mission is going to visit Pakistan soon after the general elections, and particularly to have second review and subsequently, with the board's approval, the second tranche of $1.1 billion for Pakistan by March or early April. Despite of promising economic indicators, Pakistan's long-term economic outlook still remains challenging. It direly needs political stability soon after the elections particularly, and of course the urgent reforms which are needed at different junctures, and not only that but also the strict implementation of all policy measures. To discuss all this important topic, we have in our studios Dr. Usman Chohan. He is the senior economist. Most welcome to you, Dr. Usman.
Thank you.
And we have online joining us Brigadier Retired Hamid Rashid Malik. He is the senior analyst. Most welcome to you, sir, as well. Dr. Usman, I have first question related to the second review mission that is going to pay visit after the general elections. What's going to be more crucial in this second IMF review for Pakistan?
Thank you for the question. There are several things that the IMF is going to look at. It is first going to look at how the deficits are proceeding, the fiscal deficit and the current account deficit. It is going to look at our monetary policy. It is also going to look at our foreign exchange reserves. It is going to look at our energy circular debt and other repayment issues. And therefore, it will surmise that if Pakistan has conferred and worked alongside what was stipulated in the standby agreement, and therefore then continue with the tranches as part of this emergency program.
So what are the prospects of IMF's board to give approval of this second review and subsequently to have the last tranche for Pakistan?
I believe that our caretaker government has done an excellent job adhering to the requirements, and therefore when the IMF comes and has a look, its team comes, it should be very, very satisfied with the performance of the caretaker government, which has soberly worked on all of the areas without having the need for any political gimmickry, without any need for appeasing the voters, but just doing the serious technocratic work. The credit goes to all of the ministries, including the Ministry of Finance, of Aviation, Privatization, our Foreign Ministry. So many things have been so well handled that I think there's very much room for the IMF to be appreciative of the work done thus far.
Your point well taken. Usman, when we are talking about the next government, do you think that for the next political government, how crucial it would be to have a next medium-term or long-term IMF plan? Because you know that it is going to be inevitable when you are going through the economic indicators and you need much economic stability.
Absolutely right. So for the government that will come into power, it will be very, very important that they maintain a close liaison with the IMF and continue on the path towards fiscal normalization. It's very important to do that because if you suddenly deviate, as is a tendency in all emerging market democracies, to suddenly have a populist fervor or to give subsidies or to give generous payouts for reasons that are more political than economic, then you face a damaging consequence towards your fiscal sustainability. Therefore, I think that as the current caretaker finance minister has correctly said, a future program is required. And the conditions of the future IMF programs will likely be much more lenient because the tough pain of reform has already been taken.
Already been done. When we are talking about reforms, recently National Economic Council has decided that no more federal project financing particularly for those projects who are in provinces. And this public sector development program sees lots of cuts, that is consolidated development projects program, by 10% at least, and 76 projects worth 120 billion rupees transferred to provinces for financing. So how do you see this aspect? Because on one hand, this is the IMF reform agenda. Second is that you have financing available at the federal level. And how provinces are going to accumulate that financing for those projects?
This is a very tricky question and a very important one. It is tricky because since the 18th Amendment, the devolution of fiscal responsibility and resources has been very uneven. It has been unfavorable towards the federation, towards the center. And the provinces have gone about with insufficient accountability and insufficient consideration for the overall federation, doing projects that have run amok. So I am not in favor of these provinces and their budgets being so poorly managed. I actually believe in a strong center, in terms of fiscally strong center, that can then have a redistributive effect and a proper national interest context in its federalism. This reform therefore falls into that. I don't think that without the current economic distress that the federation's finances face in terms of deficits, it would have been possible to take this decision because our provinces tend to be very large. And even by global standards, for example, our largest province, Punjab, would equate to the 10th largest country in the world by population. So because they're so large and because their finances are concentrated very much in their capitals, that you don't see a larger distributional effect of good projects into the rural areas of each province. Therefore, I think the center is a better manager than the provinces for this, and particularly the bureaucracy at the center is more competent in my judgment, and it is better for the overall picture than provincial.
So how do you see particularly the FBR revamping, because still it's now halted because of the Election Commission's apprehensions.
Yes.
Do you think that splitting into particularly the revenue and customs, then you have some sort of, what was the plan actually, might be the National Tax Authority, or might be the Federal Board of Inland Revenue, or might be you have the Federal Board of Customs, or Customs and Border, something like that. So do you think that it is important and inevitable to have a rational revenue, tax revenue and customs departments?
It's a very good question, and there's actually several different models used around the world. So what the finance minister, caretaker, is arguing for makes sense in our context. In other contexts, it might make sense to have customs and the Federal Board of Revenue together because, for example, we generate a lot of tax revenue through imports which are dealt with through customs. In other contexts, that makes sense. But here, you should have greater clarity on the enforcement and the oversight, and that is done better through splitting the two into two agencies. Now, having too many bureaucratic institutions looking over overlapping jurisdictions is often a complicated problem. And so it is generally good to have a smaller government that is more precise in its mandate with clear lines of demarcation among the areas of bureaucratic intervention or application. However, here I think it is sensible to have it split into two for the purposes of having the inland aspect of it and then having the outbound and inbound through customs. It makes better sense this way.
So FBR is also evolving a simplified tax regime for traders, for retailers and the concerned persons. So do you think that such measures are going to reduce some sort of size of informal economy and also improve the tax base, curtail the smuggling or something like that?
Absolutely. And you know, out of the principles, the global principles, let's call them the OECD, so developed country principles of good taxation, simplicity is one of the 6. The others include efficiency, fairness, neutrality, etc. So simplicity is very important because let's say you are a well-meaning trader and you actually want to be in the system. It is such a nuisance to deal with taxation as a retailer, but even as an individual, let alone corporations, that it's simply too hard and you have to have tax departments or accountants or lawyers to deal with it. This is not an efficient way to do things. Having a simplified filing process, streamlined, with fewer brackets that cover more area and don't do excess usurious interactions with the stakeholders, that is what we require. So simplicity, both in the personal income tax, sales tax, as well as in corporate things, is very necessary to streamline it.
So, what about the state bank's recent announcement of or implementation of FX matching for forex trading, forex market? So, do you think it is going to regulate the forex market and create some sort of balance of the local currency with the other currencies, particularly dollar?
This is a very good question, and yes, the answer is it absolutely will. So, the forex matching system that they have creates a kind of appropriate blindness, which is to say that the bids and asks, you don't know who's making them, so there's less room for manipulation. And this is the system that banks actually use already amongst themselves for their FX trading. Now, having a streamlined, centralized version of that is very important. It is a best practice done everywhere else. And the thing is, it is done as part of a larger FX market reform, because previously the SBP made it necessary for the banks to become bigger players, rather than these small-time people who had done a tremendously negative impact on the rupee. And you see, since crackdowns occurred on them, you see that the rupee is doing just fine. This is because small players can have far more privatized interests rather than the public interest in mind. So having this FX bidding software to do that anonymized trading is part of the efficiency, paired with the fairness and the oversight.
Definitely, it is bringing all the stakeholders together at one platform, which is good. Taken. Thank you very much. Dr. Usman, when we are talking about trade, export-led economic growth, trade reforms, and also the trade diversification, which is very important, do you think, or have you seen any sort of signs that government is implementing all those?
Yes, for example, one big credit to the caretaker government is in the IT sector, which has maintained a robust platform. It is trying to fund startups and other such things so that the higher value added services in the digital sphere become a bigger portion. So that's a good example of higher end service oriented diversification. The other elements, I think, that our export base in terms of its complexity remains too rudimentary, and it depends very much on primary commodities as well as textiles. Now, we need for this expansion a more stable global economic environment first, because when we export, it also implies somebody else has to import. And right now, a lot of countries are struggling. The EU is struggling, the United States is struggling. These are our major import partners. The Gulf is also not so large in its appetite, nor is China. So given that our import partners are tightening their belt a little bit, it means that our exports are impacted. The second is then to have a macroeconomic stability here, which includes currency stability as well as energy stability for their input costs, so that they can fund their capital. There was a lot of investment done, for example, in 2020 and 2021 in our major industries, which has yet to attain its full capacity because they aren't working at that overinvested capex. So right now, I think that there's a lot of work to be done to facilitate our major industries to then expand or horizontally to other sectors or grow further up the value chain vertically.
So we attain a lot through the getting more taxes and also cumulatively the foreign exchange reserves gone to $9.1 billion. That's good. But the thing is that still government is struggling regarding the tax base, enhancement of tax base. So how do you see what measures are required to enhance that, including the agriculture sector and retail sector is going to be, but agriculture sector must have to be in the tax net?
Yes, there are three usual suspects we identify. They are the retailers, they are the real estate, and it is the agriculture. These three are major undertaxed areas. It's true. And these have to be looked at in a more thorough fashion. The problem is that they are vested interests in all three. These three industries tend to have a very large political lobbying and power, which distorts the relative priority that would be given in the fiscal net to these sectors. However, when we look at taxation, it is just one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is government spending. And so I believe that if you are raising revenues, you must be spending it on things that generate public value. And I believe our government at the federal level and especially at the provincial level is too large. And so maybe we should look at the other side of the equation more carefully for us to have this taxation happen anyways, because the easiest area to squeeze instead of looking at key sectors is the salaried class, which is people like you and me. And we have had an increase in our taxation, which is supremely unfair. Decent people get squeezed a lot more here, and I think this is inherently unfair. At
source, then slabs, and then lots of others areas. You are absolutely right on that, particularly. When you're talking about the youth bulge, we are talking a lot about that, but unfortunately we have not implemented most of the policies. 58% of the youth is working class. So you know that they are working age group, especially 20 to 24 years of age. But unfortunately, they are facing 11.6% of the employment rate. So how do you see why how it would be for the youth particularly, because Pakistan is blessed with youth, and if the policies are implemented in a letter and spirit, Pakistan can get that growth which we are actually dreaming that is going to be reality soon.
Absolutely. But the situation isn't as bad as people make it out to be for two reasons. One is that 11% unemployment for youth for a developing country is not so bad. For example, in South Africa, it is more than 60%. In Spain, it is 50%. That's because there the entrepreneurial or the downgrading, just making things good by doesn't exist. But here, young people have to find some way of supporting the family. You unfortunately even find like people who are below the age of 18 driving around, which is illegal. They shouldn't do that. But just to stand with the family, they're trying to find money here and there. So there's a much more entrepreneurial mindset here, which is good. The second is that even if the government investment in youth human capital has not been sufficient because our literacy rate is low. The good thing is that young people in Pakistan, especially in urban areas, but also to an extent in rural areas, are finding their own means in the digital economy to gain employment. This is the freelancers. So we are one of the 3 biggest freelancing communities in the world in Pakistan. And also that they are gaining education and skills on the language side, programming side, and other things. So young people, if they are not given something, they will go and take something. And it isn't always a bad thing. They often take good things. They take skills.
So, Dr. Usman, just the State Bank Governor has announced to maintain that basis rate, that is 22%. Oh. And now we have the hyperinflation. Look, according to the State Bank, it's 29.7, but the short term is more than 40. So how do you see whether it's because of inflation that the basis rate is constant?
You know, this is a very important question at the crux of our economic situation. Maintaining a high interest rate at this level is catastrophic for business activity. Because
obviously they are opposing it.
And they are opposing it because if you look at the cash flow and the financial modeling that you would do for any enterprise, your net present value at that discount rate is too impossible. It's very hard to do any business at this level. So in order for this to come to a normal level, they need signs that inflation is coming down. Now 29% is at a different base rate now than it was 2 years ago. You see, so if it's 29% now is versus a year that was already a tough year. Yeah, that's the problem. Of course. Now if they continue to see inflation at this rate, then they will maintain a high discount rate, and business activity we won't see the growth element then. Now that puts a lot of incentive on people to just park their money in the bank. And I believe that the State Bank needs to start thinking hard about bringing interest rates low, especially as the US is bringing them down, especially as energy prices are coming down around the world, despite the hiccups that we see because of geopolitics. It is time now, if you really want growth, to consider that 22% is an impossible discount rate to do anything meaningful with.
Thank you very much. Well elaborated, Dr. Usman Chohan. Thank you very much for your presence in the studios. Thank you very much for that.